What's up, everybody? And thanks for joining me on another episode of Lessons in Learning with Lorusso, where I try to make teachers' life just a little bit easier because we need that sometimes. And today's episode is all about SGOs. This is definitely one that you're going to want to pay attention to. It's a life hack for SGOs. I'm here to make your life a little bit easier in the fall, the mid year, and the end of the year with your SGOs, turning them in, having the data. And getting that SGO calculated for you. So what you're going to want to do, you're going to want to type in Achieve New Jersey SGO into Google, and it's usually the first site that comes up, Achieve New Jersey Student Growth Objectives on the state website. Go ahead and click that. It's going to take you here. We're going to then click Forms and Documents. Once you click Forms and Documents, you're going to see a lot of different things. There's a lot of good tools on here. I've messed around with some of them, but other ones are just information on SGO, SGO overview, guidebook, assessment blueprint. I heard that was good. I didn't get a chance to mess with that. A quality rating rubric, design toolkit, assessing and adjusting your SGOs, evaluating your SGO. But what we want to focus in on today is the SGO Excel tracking and scoring tool that is in the middle. So you're going to go ahead and click that. This is a great tool. Now, back in, I believe it was 2010, New Jersey Department of Education, they got a lot of feedback and they did some reflection on the SGO process, and they found that it was difficult for teachers to calculate the SGO, time consuming, and a little confusing, to be honest. So, what they did was they released this Excel sheet scoring and tracking tool that pretty much does everything for you, and I'll explain that. But first of all, they have two versions, the 2010 version if you have old Excel, and they have a 2013 version if you have new Excel. But unfortunately, it doesn't play nice with Google Sheets. So, disclaimer, definitely find yourself a machine with Excel on it. Be nice to a neighbor who has Excel, or if your building has an old desktop computer, it most likely has Microsoft Excel. Now you can use this to include up to 400 students in your SGO. If you have that many students, kudos to you. Your data is sound. But I have 25 random 8th grade students. I'm going to go ahead, open that up. It's going to download the Excel sheet. And I'm just going to click and open that Excel sheet. So right here, you're going to open up the Excel sheet, and it's a little bit intimidating. I do want you to notice the tabs at the bottom. They're kind of cut off by my video, so I'm going to add them for you. Okay, so now I added those tabs at the bottom for you, and you should be able to see them. So there's fall input, there's fall tiering and targets, monitoring and adjustment, mid-year review sheet, and finish SGO. So we'll get to those tabs in a second, but first I do want to tell you that it is very important to collect your data before you even start to enter anything onto this Excel sheet. So for me, I have this nice handy dandy table. You do want to make a table. Kind of have to if you want to streamline the whole process. The table's going to let you just copy and paste your data in. But yeah, once you have this Excel sheet and you get the hang of it, the hardest part is collecting your data. Once you collect your data, you get that done with, you're pretty much done, and I'll show you how. So my first column, I have students. I give them a number just to protect their privacy. So in my first column, I have class average. So I'm going to go ahead and use that as one of my tools for tiering my students in the fall. You can see my class averages. They're pretty high right now. I have a great group of 8th graders. They're all doing very well, and the lowest scores are 89. You're going to see that is not going to be a problem with the tiering. And I like to include class average because it's a good indication of where students should be tiered wise. My second column is my pre-assessment. So this is what you're giving to your students in the beginning of the year. And generally speaking, it's going to have stuff that they're going to learn throughout the year. So they are not going to do as hot as you wanted them to do. And that's good because your whole objective here is to show growth. So the first pre-assessment, it's going to have things that they're going to learn. So your pre-assessment is going to have things that they do not know, and that's okay. So your scores are going to be lower. That's fine because you're showing growth. So you can see my scores here are low, but that's fine. I'm hoping that in the end, they learn all the topics that are on this pre-assessment, and then my final assessment, they're doing great and hitting their target scores. My next column is Lexile score. I'm new to the school, so I don't know the students very well, so I chose to use their Lexile level. All right, lifestyle level as a good indicator of what tier they should be on. And then my last one that I like to use is markers of future success. And I have 3 topics in here that I find that I use to determine a score from 3 to 12. The first one is active participant. Second one is class CFUs, which check for understandings. And then my last one's academic independence. And that's how I'm coming up with my score between a 3 and a 12 that they're going to get, and I'm going to put into my SGO. The last column, those are just my pretend final scores just for the sake of this video. But normally I keep that column blank. Okay, now going back to our Excel sheet, what I want you to take a look at is the top left right off the bat. Again, we have our tabs at the bottom. Okay, for the fall, you're just concentrating on those first 2 tabs: fall input and fall tiering and targets. Um, and then I will go over the other tabs when we get to them. And also for the fall, when you're turning in your My Learning Plan, you're going to take a look at the SGO Form tab. So when you click the SGO Form tab at the end, this is where you are going to put in some things that you want to turn in the fall as well. And then it has sections as you progress through the year and get to your final. It will populate the score for you, and then you're going to put your reflection, things like that, standards, rationale. All right, but going back to that fall input tab, that's what we're using right now if you're doing your SGOs like me. So you're going to pop in your name in the teacher slot. So I'm putting Lorusso, my school, CDMS, or Cedar Drive Middle School. Grade, I'm teaching grade 6 and 8. I'm going to have one for 6th and one for 8th grade, but for this one it's just 8th grade students. I might change that to just 8. My course name is science, and interval of instruction is 52 minutes. So now in the students column, all right, this is where it becomes very easy once you have, if you have all your data ready to go. If you go to the SGO form, you can see that it already populated some of that form for you just by entering those first few things. Now to the student column. If you have your data on a table, it's pretty simple. You just are going to copy your students and you are going to paste them in. So you're going to see if you have that table, it works very nicely, puts them in order for you, and then you can go to column 1, which is going to be your pre-assessment. I make it my pre-assessment. It really does not matter as long as you know which column they are in. But already you can see it populated the total number of students. So make sure that total number of students is correct so that you copy and pasted the correct number. And now to column 1, I'm going to go grab my pre-assessment data. So I'm going to copy the entire column. And I'm going to go back to my Excel sheet and I'm just going to hit paste in that first cell, and it is going to paste them right next to the student that it belongs to, right in order, as long as your data table is set up correctly. So over to the right, you're going to see it already populated some of that sheet for you. So we have our tiers. There's 4 different options for you. You can use 2 tiers, 3 tiers, 4 tiers, or 5 tiers. All right. And the Excel sheet, it has directions. Okay. So each of these tiers is determined by breaking your data up into 2, 3, 4, or 5 tiers. So most schools and New Jersey Department of Education suggest 3 tiers, but if you do 4 tiers, it's right there for you. But taking a look at the 2 tiers, it automatically creates your ranges for your tiers. So you can see here, if we were going to do 2 tiers, my students that's in tier 1 who are scoring a 64 or less, they're going to be my tier 1. Now, it's important to keep in mind that tier 1 is your lowest tier, tier 2 is middle, and then 3 is higher for if you have 4, and 5 is the highest. So it goes tier 1 lowest. If you're doing 3 tiers, tier 3 is going to be your highest. Okay, so you can see here that for tier 1, if you choose to do 2 tiers, it already came up with using, I believe it uses the mean, median, range, and standard deviation to come up with this suggestion of the tiers. Tier 1 students that are scoring 64 or less, they should be in tier 1. And greater than 64 is tier 2. Now, if you're using 3 tiers, which most of you will be, it's going to show you that tier 1 is going to be 60 or lower based on those calculations. And this is a suggested, but you do have the option at the bottom. I'll show you in a second. Tier 2, it says between 60 and 70, and then Tier 3, your top tier, is going to be anything greater than 70. And this, again, this is for column 1. This is my pre-assessment. Now, you can choose 5 tiers. It does show you those. And again, at the bottom, you do have the freedom. If you feel these ranges for the tiers are a little off, you can change them. But let me go ahead and put in the rest of my data so we can see the tiers that it creates. So column 2, I'm going to go ahead to my data table and I'm going to grab their class average. Now these numbers, decimals, it doesn't matter. The calculator is going to do the work for you. It's going to find the range for each tier for you. And these numbers, again, my class averages were very close, but you can see if we go to number of tiers 3, my top tier, my tier 1, which is the lowest tier, they are going to be a 94 or less. And then between 94 and 98 is tier 2. And then anything 98 and greater is tier 3. And it makes sense if you look at the data. My lowest is at 89.6. So that's why those ranges are much closer together. Let's grab my third column. It's going to be Lexile level. So I'm going to go ahead, grab that, copy, paste it in. And again, you're going to see that it populates over here. It gives the suggested tier ranges. So if we go to 3, now it's suggesting that a Lexile level less than or equal to 1112 is your tier 1, between 1112 and 1250 is your tier 2, and greater than 1250 are going to be your tier 3 top students. And then column 4 is my last one, and these are going to be my markers of future success. So I'm going to head grab those, copy, and paste. So now at the bottom here, you're going to see that if you're going to use any of these selections, the suggestions, all you're going to do is type in the number of tiers that you're using. So again, I'm using 3. So in each box, if I'm happy with the suggestions, which I highly recommend, you're going to put a 3 in each box to let the Excel sheet know that you are happy with those and that's what you're going to go with. If you aren't happy with those, you can go ahead and make sure they say not using any of these suggestions. Again, I don't recommend this because the tiers that it calculates are pretty accurate. But again, if you have some outliers, it's going to throw off your ranges and then you can manually put in. So when you click that, it's going to tell you that for tier 1, all you're going to do is put in the highest score that they can get, that they will get in order to be tier 1. So maybe in this case, in my pre-assessment column, it was a 60. So I'll put a 60 there. Then for tier 2, the highest for tier 2, I could put 70, and that will make it so that my tier 2s are greater than 60 and less than 70. And then for the last tier, tier 3, you're going to put a max possible high score, which is 100. None of them got a 100, but it's going to make it so that anything less than 100 and greater than your 70 is your tier 3. So you are making your customized ranges down below, and that you can do. But again, the suggestions, I feel they are pretty accurate with the calculations. Unless you have outliers. All right, so now that our tiers are populated, we are actually done with the first tab. We're done with the fall input, and we can go to our second tab, which is fall tiering and targets. So once we go to that second tab, you are going to see, mine's not populated because I forgot I removed those to show you, but I'm going to put my 3s back in there to tell the Excel sheet that I am good with their suggested ranges, and I'm going with 3 tiers. So now we're going to go to that second tab, and your second tab is going to be populated with their tiers. It calculates their tiers for you. So based on those 4 columns, it comes up with their preparedness group, and that's what tier the Excel calculator suggests the students. Now you can override a student selected tier. All right, so if we take a look at one of the students, this student got tier 3, tier 3, tier 2, tier 2, and it bumped them up to tier 3. So if you don't agree with that, you can change it over to the right. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And I know the student and I think they are actually a tier 2, so I changed it. Now it's totally up to you with all the other students. You can take a look at them. You can agree or disagree. I don't change them too much, just if I know that it was a little off on that student. But like the last one, most of the time it's pretty obvious. And again, it calculates the preparedness group based on a formula to determine what tier it should be. So it's pretty accurate most of the time, unless you really feel a student should be somewhere else. So now we're going to take a look at the top, and we have our number of students in each tier. So I had 5 in tier 1, 13 in tier 2, and 7 in tier 3. So next we're going to be taking a look at the top, and it populates the number of students in each tier. So tier 1, I had 5 students. Tier 2, I had 13 students, and tier 3, I had 7. So that's a good bell curve. I'm happy with that. But again, every classroom's different. You might have a lot of tier 1s and a medium amount of tier 2s and barely any tier 3s, and that's totally fine. They all get different weights in the end that help to calculate your score. But in my case, all right, I had a good amount of each one with the most in tier 2. So the next column is target score on SGO assessment. Now this is up to you. This is where you're going to decide what you think they should get on that final SGO assessment, what you want them to achieve. So I always like to go back, take a look at the scores, take a look at my ranges, and here on the pre-assessment, my tier 1s, my bottom tier, are 60 or less. So I'm going to shoot for them to get a 75. It's usually what I go with. 15 points above what they got on the pre-assessment is the target score. Hopefully they do better. Now I'm going to take a look at tier 2 between 60 and 70. So I'm going to go with 85 for them. I would like them to get 85 or higher. And then my tier 3s, my top tier students, I actually want them to get a 95. So a little ambitious, a 95 or higher on that SGO assessment in order to reach my goal. So here I'm going to just put the highest score a student can achieve on the SGO assessment. So if your pre-assessment was a percentage, all right, you have to go with another percentage again, so it'll be highest score is 100. But again, if your pre-assessment was 300 points or you wanted to make it 500 points, doesn't matter. You can put that here as well. Just make sure your final assessment's the same. And now target percentage for each group to get a 3. For you to get a 3, which is proficient in New Jersey, most districts and NJDOE, they suggest 80%, so I'm going to throw in 80% here. But again, this is something that you can talk to your principal about. If you feel that 75%, 70% is fair for you to get a 3, this is where you can adjust that. Some principals will work with you, some may not. And once I put those 80% in, it populates the right column with number of students need to get a 3. So to get a 3, I would need 4 out of 5 students in tier 1. I would need 11 out of 13 in tier 2. And I would need 6 out of 7 in tier 3. And you are now done with your fall input. So that's it. You're done with the fall input. You're going to actually go to your last tab here, which is SGO form. And on the SGO form, this is where you are going to throw in the beginning of the year, you're going to throw in your standards, your rationale, and your assessment methods so that when you attach this to my learning plan, it's there and you can just say refer to the Excel sheet. All right, also down here, it shows the breakdown of the starting points and preparedness groupings. It gives you the exact numbers where it rounded in the Excel sheet. And you're going to want to use this for the next part, your student growth objective. This is where you are going to state simply what percentage of students in each preparedness group will meet that target. So it even gives you a sample sentence. So I would write something like 80% of students in each group will meet the target score. Then I'm going to describe how the target scores that I chose reflect my ambitious and achievable scores for my students. And I'm just going to say refer to the table below to see those target scores and to see the number of students in each group. All right, and you can see right below that it has my tier 1 with 5 students and my target score is a 75. My tier 2, 13 students, target score is 85, and tier 3, 7 with a 95. Then under that, it has the scoring plan. So right here, it's pretty useful. So down here, I got my 3 tiers. I got the student target scores. So tier 1, my target score is 75, and the next column shows you each score. So column excellent for a score of a 4, I would need 90% of my tier 1 students to score 75 or higher. For me to get a 3, which is proficient in New Jersey, I would need 80% That's what I entered in there. 80% or higher to score a 75 or higher. And I would get a 3 for tier 1. And then for tier 1 to get partial or a 2, 70% or higher. And then for a 1, which is insufficient, lower than 70% of that tier. So after that, you are done with your fall input, and there's a spot down at the bottom for your name, your signature, principal signature. So if you were to print this out, you can get all of that. You can go over it with your principal, or you can just attach it to My Learning Plan just like this. And it's pretty easy. You can just say in My Learning Plan a couple times to refer to the Excel sheet. But if you are done with fall, you can stop watching the video there. Thanks for joining me. But if you want to see me carry the whole thing through to the end, which is very cool to see your score just be calculated for you, and it's pretty simple, you can continue. So now we're going to go to the tab for monitoring and adjustment. Now this is what you do in January or February when you decide how your SGO is doing. And there is a place here for you to store data. It doesn't affect the Excel sheet at all. It's just somewhere you can store the data for your students so that you can decide if you need to switch up their tier. There's a lot of columns there, but if you do decide with that evidence that you put in the middle that you do need to switch their tier, you can do it over to the right and it will affect your Excel sheet. So you can decide if that tier 2 student is actually a tier 1, they're not doing as well as you thought they would, or a tier 3, they're doing better than you thought they would. All right, this is the time to change it. Now if you go to the next tab, which is mid-year review sheet, you will see that it has two boxes that we're going to focus on. So this box is going to let you change your target scores of the test. So let's say you're not getting to all the material, or you're ahead of the material and you know your class is doing great and you think those scores are too low. So this is where you can change it. But if you are behind maybe, or your students aren't doing as well and you think they're not going to score as well, you can change your target score. But again, in the middle of the year, you do need to get this approved by your principal, administrator, whoever is doing your final review. Then we have the bottom box here. So this one is where you are going to change your percentage of students hitting that target. So your new target percentage. So this is the one where if you talk to your principal and you say 80% might not be attainable for me. So this is where you can put in the new target of maybe 75% or 70%, depending on what you decide to do. All right, so now we're going to go to our final Finish SGO tab, it's called. And it's very simple. Once you get to this point in June or May, whenever you are going to finish your SGO, you're just going to grab your final SGO scores. You're going to copy and paste them in to our score on SGO assessment, paste them in, and that's it. It's pretty much done. It's calculated for you. You're going to see that it says, did the student hit the target, no or yes? So from there, all right, we're going to take a look at our results of our SGO graph, all populated by the calculator, the Excel calculator. And again, if you decide that tier 3, you were a little ambitious with your target score, and you felt that maybe it should have been a 90, this is when you can also go back to that the middle of the year adjustments on the monitor and adjustment and mid-year review sheet, and you can change the target score for that tier 3. So maybe I was a little ambitious with 95 and higher for my tier 3 students. And I'll go back to that tab and I'm going to put my new target score of, so maybe I feel a 90 or higher. Maybe the SGO was a little bit more difficult than I thought it would be. So now it's going to change your total SGO score. So now in that tier 3 group, 7 out of 7 of my students hit it. A score of 90 or higher, so 100%. So I got an SGO score of a 4 for that one, and it raised my final SGO score to a 3.08 automatically. All right, so now finishing up our SGO, you can see our score, and it's going to automatically populate your results of student growth objective. It's going to give you the students at target score, the teacher SGO score for that tier, and the weights that it used to calculate that final total teacher SGO score. Now, these two boxes down here, this is where you're going to describe any changes that you made to your SGO after initial approval. So if you had to make any adjustments, put it there. Maybe changes to population, you lost a student, you gained a student. Make sure you let the principal know that it might have affected your data. Or maybe you had students that had to quarantine due to COVID and missed a large chunk of your teaching and fell behind. So there's the section that you want to let the principal know some of these things that affected your score and their unforeseen circumstances. The last box, that is our review of the SGO at the annual conference. And basically, this is your reflection. So, as a teacher, you know how to reflect. You're going to reflect on your SGO. You're going to describe some successes, some challenges, and the lessons that you learned from this SGO. Maybe something you want to do in the future, or steps you want to do to change the SGO next year. So, that is the box for that. And then once you have finished that, your SGO is done. Again, at the bottom, there's a spot for you to get signed by your evaluator if you choose to print it out, but all the time. But since most people are using My Learning Plan, you're just going to save the document and you're going to add it as an artifact to My Learning Plan. So in My Learning Plan in your SGO, there's a box to add artifacts, and you hit add artifact from file on your computer and you just throw that in there and throw in your data sheet. So then on My Learning Plan, you can say refer to the Excel sheet, and you can say it a couple times. There's a couple sections that I say just refer to the Excel sheet because all the data is in there. So it does make your life a lot easier when finishing that SGO. You can see how quick it makes it. No calculations needed and no calculator needed. So just throw your data in and you're good to go. So that about wraps it up on our Excel tool to help calculate our SGO. Again, it definitely streamlines the process. The hardest part is going to be putting your data together in a table so that you can just copy and paste it into this Excel sheet. But once you have your data together, you're pretty much done. You're just copy and pasting. It does all the calculations for you, suggests the tiers, and I highly suggest going with those. And then you're just adding it as an artifact to My Learning Plan. But again, fortunately, it doesn't play well with Google Sheets. So find a buddy who has Excel and ask if they can do it, because it does not take that long as you have your data on you. So thanks for joining me on Lessons in Learning with Lorusso. I'll see you next time.